magic. I think everyone thinks of this term a little bit differently, but for me, growing up as a 2002 kid who still had the VHS tapes, yes, we had those in my day still. I grew up with Disney. Disney was the only thing that I was really allowed to watch in my house, and Disney was a huge part of my childhood. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely have a huge bias towards Disney because I grew up with it. This was my childhood. But I don't think it takes a genius to see that the magic that we used to have is not the same magic that we have now. So let's talk about some reasons today that I personally think Disney has lost its magic. So what do I mean by magic first and foremost? Have you ever watched a recent film and just found yourself being like, that was an okay story? And have you ever went and watched one of the older series, one of the older movies, and been like, wow, now that was good? That's what I'm talking about. That is the specific magic that I am talking about. I grew up watching movies that were hand-drawn, and while I personally do like a lot of the more CGI-focused movies...
Hey! I bet you're the best crane crew in the world!
Wow, those guys are jerks.
There's just something so beautiful and nostalgic about those old hand-drawn movies. So first and foremost, talking about CGI, let's go ahead and get it out of the way. The threat of AI in art. Disney is art. And maybe the corporate values now are not the same as the corporate values back then, but Disney has always been a corporation. Let's get that straight. They have always been a corporation, and we know corporations are not the best. They like to cut ties and they like to cut corners. But one thing that I really hope that they do not cut ties with is real people making art. And I do have to say, sadly, we've already seen this a little bit. Now, I'm sure many of you here are not big fans of Marvel, but while I like the girly things, I'm also a very big Marvel fan.
I'd like to go home.
And I'd like the McRib to be available year-round, but sometimes dreams don't come true!
Whenever something new comes out, I tend to watch it. Whether I like it or not, I still tend to watch it. And something that happened roughly about a year ago made me and a lot of other fans of Disney and Marvel just very upset and honestly a little bit alarmed. There was a series released called Secret Invasion, and just for a quick rundown, this is basically about Nick Fury from the Disney/Marvel-verse, where basically aliens are invading. Haha, get it? Secret Invasion? Yeah, it was okay. I dropped it after 2 episodes. But if you actually watch the opening, maybe you can see it for yourself, but the art looks a little bit weird. You wonder why? Yeah, it's because it's AI. They actually released this show, this series, with AI components and thought that we were stupid enough to not even realize it. Or maybe they were betting that we would realize it. Maybe this is their way of testing the waters with AI. Regardless, fans were not happy, and even though I did not like the plot, and that's the reason I dropped it, I am happy to drop it after the first couple episodes because I do not support AI art. As an artist myself, as a kid who grew up drawing by hand, using watercolors, and honestly having teachers criticize my anime drawings, I put a lot of work into my art, and that is how you grow as an artist, is you keep drawing and learning. I do not support AI art whatsoever. It has no place in the world of artistry. So if Secret Invasion taught us one thing, it's that Disney as a corporation is already experimenting possibly with the thought of AI, and that as a fan scares me. And I did ask you guys on my community page if you had any thoughts about Disney, and I really liked this one by It's Timberjack, who says, "I've grown completely apathetic to modern day Disney to the point that I have even denied myself the freedom to enjoy nostalgia for their past. That doesn't happen because of a few bad movies. That happens when a consumer loses trust in a brand that they once knew and loved because it failed them. It pushed them out and it made them feel unwelcome." And personally, I think that this quote, "it made the consumer feel unwelcome," applies to me here with AI. If you've already released AI, how can I trust that you won't do it again? Next, let's talk about sequels. Sequels are honestly, in my opinion, one of my favorite things that Disney does. I know, go ahead, boo me, whatever. I actually like a lot of the sequels, even though they're kind of bad at times. Not you, Cinderella 2 and 3, not you, never you. You are classical perfection. But recently, I've actually come to realize that a lot of people don't like The Little Mermaid 2 featuring Melody, Ariel's daughter, and that was one of my favorites. And I know a lot of people didn't like it because it kind of defeats Ariel's whole like arc of I want to go and be a part of both worlds, and now she's sheltering her daughter from, the ocean where she grew up. Like, does she even know her grandfather, King Triton? Like, I understand there's some issues with the sequel, but I did really like it. And this is the general issue with a lot of fans when it comes to sequels, is that sequels tend to change the main story. Now, if you've been on my channel for a while, you probably have seen that I've talked about this many times because this was one of my all-time favorite forgotten spin-off series, which is Disney's Enchanted Tales. And personally, I have the Aurora and Jasmine version, and if you want to see more about that, I have a video with SG Hope on her channel. Definitely check it out, it is a great video. But I loved this as a kid. I loved being able simply to see my two favorite at the time princesses, because as we know, I have shifted towards Tiana over the last couple of years because she's just goated. But as a kid, my favorite princesses were always Jasmine and Aurora. And I personally think that Jasmine's story is perfect. This movie focuses on both Jasmine and Aurora's own individual story, and they usually push this narrative of like a lesson. For example, for Jasmine, her story was becoming brave and keeping up with perseverance. Basically, her whole story is that there is this very kind of stingy, nasty horse that was her mother's, and nobody really, can do much with this horse because it's a little bit of a brat. But when the horse runs away, Jasmine is quick on her feet to run after and keep trying and showing the horse kindness and trying to build that trust with the horse. It takes a lot of bravery, and that's her story. But Aurora is learning to not be greedy? Yeah, that's where the spin-off part comes in, because as we know from the original story, for Disney at least, Aurora is not a greedy character. Aurora is very humble and gentle, but yet in this series, Aurora tends to be a little bit of a brat. Now that she's a princess, she gets responsibilities, but instead of doing what a normal Aurora would do and listen to her people and think about it, instead she just uses a magical wand left by the fairies. Yeah, totally not in Aurora's character, and so obviously a lot of people had a problem with that. Sequels can either be good or they can be bad. I do think one of the best sequels that I have personally seen in the last couple years was Inside Out 2.
I'm selfish. I'm kind. I'm not good enough. I'm a good person.
I really love that movie, and again, I think it's because they didn't change the characters' personalities or the plot. It's still the main characters trying to help out Riley, who they love, who is their person. And that, my friends, is the problem with sequels, is too many sequels will come in and just try to change the plot and the characters. The characters in the first movie will have a goal, and then by the second movie, that goal is completely thrown out the window, and morals and everything is just not what it was in the first movie. And I definitely think that, let's be real, capitalism plays a huge part in some of these nostalgic Disney series. Sequels can absolutely show us a new side of our favorite characters, but only if it's done right. And I do think that too many sequels have turned into cash grabs now.
I forbid you to take another step down these stairs!
Okay.
And And last but not least of my points, let's dive into the live actions. I am a huge believer that the best of the live actions that they ever made was the Cinderella movie with Lily James. That felt like a lot of care was put into not just the story and keeping it as original to the original source of Disney's Cinderella as possible, but the care and attention to the details, the outfits, the scenery, and even the music is what makes the movie. There are a lot of movies that Disney has made recently into live action versions, and not a lot of them have hit the mark that Cinderella has. Cinderella was one of the best, and I really do feel like Disney has kind of failed to keep up with that. For example, they tend to change the characters too much. Again, with the problem with sequels is now the new problem for live action, is that they're changing the story too much from their original source. Now don't get me wrong, let me clarify here, Disney does not own every single princess, every single story that they have. What might be a Disney classic does not necessarily mean it is the story by Disney. For example, Mary Poppins is not Disney's actual story. For example, Mary Poppins was written by P.L. Travers. This is a story that you can actually see by Disney that talks about the story of how Disney acquired Mary Poppins from Travers, which is Saving Mr. Banks. It's actually a pretty good movie, and it showcases that Disney tends to buy or get the copyright to a lot of films. Cinderella is not an original story by Disney. But with that being said, a lot of us know the simple story of Cinderella through the eyes of Disney and not its original counterpart, which is the Brothers Grimm, which is much more gruesome than what we see in the Disney version. And I also really like this comment by Wafer Dreamy, who says, I hate how modern Disney doesn't understand most of their characters and their live action cash grabs, which honestly, that quote, love that, because that is what these live action movies turn into when you don't stick it closely enough to the main source. They become nothing more than cash grabs who write off of the name of the story that you're trying to tell. Jasmine doesn't want to be the Sultan, she just wants free will. Mulan's entire character arc is that she doesn't have the physical strength of a warrior like her other experienced teammates, and that's why she trains. Now she's just a Mary Sue. And Jimmy was so mean to Pinocchio in the live action, like, Jimmy saw that Pinocchio was kicked out of school and was forced by Honest John, yet he still acts like it's Pinocchio's fault. Bring back my humble Jimmy. Again, this is the problem with live action, is when you change the source material or you don't give enough love to the source material, this is what it turns into. Nothing more than a cash grab. And I do think that there are some good live actions that could have been better. For example, I loved Belle. I think that the scenery was beautiful, the music was beautiful, and Be Our Guest was so well done, brought to life from animation. But there's a few things that I think could have been worked upon, such as the weird auto-tune and also the costume for Belle. When you think of Belle, you think of the big poofy dress. So tell me why, in the entirety of that movie, I was more of a fan of the white floral dress at the end than her iconic golden yellow dress. So now let's harken back to the beginning point. I definitely think that these 3 points here are the main contending reasons as to why the magic, quote unquote magic, has started to dwindle from Disney. And I have seen a lot of people on Reddit throw out a suggestion that I believe to be completely wrong, which is that the magic is not there anymore because now you're too old, which of course, Reddit is the place where you go to lose brain cells, or you go to share posts that didn't have any brain cells to begin with. I've seen too many people state, on Reddit alone at least, that the reason Disney does not feel as nostalgic or magical or fun anymore is simply because we're too old now, and that these stories were made for children the ages of 3 to 10. Which, Obviously, tell me that you've never watched a Disney movie without telling me you've never watched a Disney movie. Now, I am in no means a Disney adult, just still a casual fan from childhood. But we need to talk about the fact that Disney movies have never been just for children. Disney movies, especially the older ones, were much darker, and there has always been a theme in the majority of their movies, a theme of overcoming something, whether that is learning to overcome your fears. For example, with Tangled, the whole shtick of Rapunzel is overcoming her fear of leaving and honestly being groomed to stay in a tower for her life. She overcomes this fear and goes off to find who she really is. In the story of Mulan, Mulan just wants to save her father's life. She knows since he's wounded from previous war, if he goes back into war, he's going to die. She would much rather take his place. It's a noble story of a girl who is fighting for her family. And let's not even get me started on my favorite princess, Tiana, who is a humble, hard-working woman who wants to start up her own business, who has these dreams of starting up this business with her father, but now that he's passed, all she can do is carry his memory by opening up a restaurant. She works tirelessly. It is a story of hard work, humbleness, and perseverance. In Naveen's case, it's also a story of learning to overcome your spoiledness, because yes, I love you, Naveen, but dang, was my boy a spoiled brat. Disney has a lot of stories that I do think a lot of adults can learn from. And don't even get me started on some of the newer movies. Some of them escape through the cracks and are genuinely good at storytelling, but I think too many miss the mark when it comes to this enlightenment about yourself and looking at yourself and trying to change for the better. I think the lessons have dwindled down a bit. Genuinely, the people are what make the movie, and when everything turns into corporate greed, that's where the humbleness of artists go to waste. The creativity of writers go to waste. In my opinion, I think Disney needs to take a step back and remember some of the older values. And of course, again, this is a corporation, so, they're gonna do what they do. But again, you're driving consumers away. You're driving fans away. I think the best thing to do is take a look at some older works and stop popping out slop. All in all, I definitely think that Disney has some problems. Are they, in my opinion, absolutely horrible and unwatchable? No, but I will say that the writing has definitely fallen off over the years. And there's always going to be some people out there with different opinions. There's going to be people who don't like the movies anymore and they're just not up to par with what they're used to or what they believe they're used to. And there's always going to be diehard fans. I have met people who personally hate Wish, and I have met people who personally love Wish. Personally, I'm in the middle because I like the characters, but the writing could have been much better in my opinion. And that's genuinely what it is. It's all up to opinion. But I think we as a collective can come together and say that Disney does not hit like it used to. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. Again, I really love Disney, but I can't deny that I've not been happy with the state of Disney. Does that mean that I hate Disney and that I won't buy anything Disney or watch anything Disney? No, but it does mean that as a consumer, I can recognize that there's definitely some issues going on. But let me know your opinions down below. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!